So with that, let me introduce you to tonight's guest speaker, Bill Searfoss. He's a lifelong resident of Oxford, New York, just outside of Binghamton. Recently retired from Raymond Corporation, 40 years?
Yeah.
40 years in logistics and audit operations. He got involved in Civil War research and documentation during the petitioning process for VA memorial markers and grave sites. It started with a gentleman by the name of Private Charles Moon in the 5th New York Heavy. From there, it ballooned, and I think you're at 15 and counting now for
at
markers.
Least 15.
For markers, and he's working on one for his great-grandfather, Joshua Maxwell, out of the 144th New York. He's been actively involved in a number of pension file transcriptions and recently contributed to the transcription and publication of the Civil War diaries of T.G. Ingersoll from Company K of the 10th New York Cavalry, which was also out of this area. He's taken research to another level. He's organized probably over 25 memorial services for individuals in his local community. And he's actually recruited some of the descendants and actually provided them with some lost history that they didn't even know about yet. So it's been a fun haul. We've been down and done a couple of these programs for him. Tonight he's going to share a story from a Chemung, Bend County's area young man, joined the Army for adventure. It was a story that was totally unknown to us until about a month and a half ago. And with it came battlefield captures, desertions, POWs in prisons, and the sinking of a troop transport. So with that, I am going to turn that over to Bill and let him tell you all about the fun stuff he found.
I'd like to thank everybody for letting me speak. Yeah, it was about a month and a half ago. Terry sent me an email out of the blue, how would you like to talk about the Southern Tier Boy, at our History Under the Trees program. Now, technically I guess I am part of the Southern Tier there in Oxford. It's about 55 miles that way. I guess that's east. And, okay. And, I was puzzling over some of the data that I had, different men, and I just happened to glance at some ship disasters, and I thought, maybe we can find something from the Sultana disaster. And the Sultana was, it was like a transport ship. It was meant to hold 350, and they were hired to move prisoners, former prisoners, north during the last part of April of 1865. Now, I looked at it, and they're all Midwesterners, and I thought, There was another ship disaster I was vaguely aware of. It was called the General Lyons. And she caught fire and burned off the coast of Cape Hatteras about March 30th, 1865. 600 on board, 29 survivors. And I was looking down the survivors list, and I saw Private Isaiah Lewis, Company A, 89th New York, as a survivor, one of 29 who survived. And I thought, And I checked it out, and this guy enlisted in Dix. He was right here. He grew up in what they called Havana at the time, but it was Montour Falls. And he was a local boy here for sure. And I talked with Terry about it, and the whole thing caught fire then. And I was able to dig up enough information about the man. What piqued my curiosity more than anything, in addition to his being a survivor of the General Lyons disaster, he was a prisoner of war in the Salisbury, North Carolina Confederate prison. I don't know if anybody knows about the place, but it wasn't exactly Andersonville, but it was not a nice place either. And then it showed him as having galvanized, which I found very interesting. So anyway, I decided to pursue it, and with Terry's support, we were able to pull some strings at the last minute. We got his service and pension files, and everything came out. It sort of unraveled and became even more confusing. So, without further ado, this is the story of the Odyssey of Isaiah Lewis, Company A, 89th New York Infantry. Now, as the saying goes, you can't talk about a whole man without talking about his whole family. By extension, you can't talk about a whole military unit without talking about the men in it. And you can't talk about a man in the war without talking about both. Now, be that as it may, there are men that a lot of us have known who both confirm and contradict that very saying. The man who we are here today is just such a case in point. Now, Isaiah Lewis was third born to Jesse and Rachel Monroe Lewis. He was preceded in birth by Lucinda and Henry, then followed by brothers William, Joseph, and James Alma, and then finally by kid sister Mary Elizabeth Lewis. An interesting family when you dig into them, to say the very least. But time doesn't allow me to go into any great length right now concerning his siblings, except to say that his older brother Henry enlisted in the 141st New York Infantry, another local unit here, on August 14, 1862. As part of that unit, he would bear witness to and be a part of extensive action in the Western Theater, culminating in Sheridan's March to the Sea, his drive north through the Carolinas, and would bear witness to Johnson's final surrenders at Bentonville, I believe it was, effectively ending large-scale resistance in the East. But an exhaustive examination of the military life of Henry Lewis is for another time. We're here today to take a look at the military life of his kid brother and what a tale it is to tell. And I have a kid brother, and I gotta say, you know, this kind of erratic, I guess you would call it behavior, wasn't very surprising. Now, as was previously noted, Isaiah was probably born between 1841 and 1845 in Jacksonville, Tompkins County, New York. According to official records, he enlisted at the town of Dix on August 10, 1861 in Company A, 89th New York Infantry to serve 3 years. Now for the 89th, as Isaiah's brother Henry would see the face of total war in the West with the 141st, Isaiah would see nothing less than total carnage in the East with the 89th. Beginning in 1862, they joined Burnside's Expeditionary Corps and would participate in the Maryland campaign, followed by action at South Mountain and a major sanity check at Bloody Antietam. And we all know about Antietam. There were over 100 of their number, and anyone useful was accepted. By the time the prison was emptied, the list of Union deserters showed some 2,400 names, and those most recently recruited were given the choice of staying in the Confederate ranks or going back with their comrades in the prison to take their chances in the exchange process. Those who made the choice to go back were, with very few exceptions, dealt with swiftly and severely. So now the question becomes, where does Isaiah Lewis fit into all this? The official records show Isaiah Lewis charged with having joined the rebel army while a prisoner of war at Salisbury Prison. The same records then show those charges as having been removed from his record as erroneous. What's more, the charges of desertion from October of 1862 were also removed from his record. By all appearances then, Isaiah Lewis was the victim of a simple clerical error that was compounded by sloppy record keeping, at least once for certain, if not twice. Adding to the confusion, if that's what it could be called, is the following unsigned, undated note we found in Lewis's pension file. It says the following: his name appears on an unofficial list, copied from the original by Moses Palmer Jr. of Lynn, Massachusetts, at the time a prisoner of war at Salisbury. The date was not given. This charge of having joined the rebel army is removed as erroneous. He escaped from Wilmington March 15th or 16th, 1865, reported at Camp Parole, Maryland, April 6th, was furloughed April 12th for 30 days, sent to Elmira, New York, May 25th while on furlough, and was there mustered out of the service May 29th, 1865. Confusing? Yes. But there's more. Now, by February of 1865, the exchange process resumed, and the Salisbury prison began to empty, and prisoners were limited to 3 options for the evacuation. Those prisoners judged as being too sick to remain behind at the prison until such time as they were judged to be well enough to move. They were, and some were alive in Salisbury on April 12th when George Stoneman and his cavalry entered town. would stay there. Those prisoners judged as well enough to travel but not on foot were to be loaded on the few trains that were still operational to be transported by rail to Greensboro, and from there to either Wilmington on the coast or to points north for exchange. The reason for the multiple points was in part because of the varying gauges of the Confederate rail system. If they had a train that was going to Richmond and nothing else was headed east, those guys went to Richmond. And finally, those prisoners as most able to make the trip to Greensboro on foot were to travel the 50 miles to Greensboro on foot, and once there, board trains that would take them the rest of the way to either Wilmington or to points north. Now, estimates vary, but of the 2,500 or so men who started the trek to Greensboro on foot, about half of them would make it to the final destination. It must also be noted that there were deaths during all phases of transport by rail. These men were starved down, I mean, very close to dying as it was. In most cases, the dead, often seen as useless weight and therefore a liability to the living, were offloaded at various points for burial along the way. And there's towns like Thomasville, where there's a cemetery and there's a whole section that just says Union Dead on the stones. Common consensus is that these were probably from the prisoner trains that were headed north. Now some were just thrown off the side. They were moving, they just threw them off the side, got rid of them like yesterday's garbage. Now we don't know which mode of transportation Lewis took in getting to Greensboro, but we do know he had to get to Wilmington by rail, where he offloaded and proceeded on foot to an exchange point. That was the drill. Once there, he had to proceed to a triage area, where physical condition was evaluated and determination was made of what kind or if special treatment was warranted. The number of prisoners coming in and the sheer, it was overwhelming to the doctors there. They actually had to set up a triage and they had a gangrene area. It was pretty much several hundred. These men were, they were figured they were as good as dead. They were just shoved off to the side. They took care of the ones they could take care of. Those deemed as most likely to survive were given first priority. The process moved to a scrubbing and delousing area where old clothing was immediately discarded before all else, and in many cases hair was cut as close to the scalp as possible. Can't get at them lice without, removing the hair. Now, new uniforms were issued, and the men were assigned to temporary quarters to await transport to a convalescent area or repatriation with their assigned unit. Now, they began monitoring these men because what they were trying to do was make up for lost time, and they were actually overeating and killing themselves. It was described to me that they had been on a diet for so long that was deficient of protein that when they did get protein, like some of them tried to eat 2 dozen of eggs, it was actually fatal to them. There are accounts of coffee, just plain coffee, having an intoxicating effect. It was almost like being drunk to these men. They had a lot of catching up to do. That's just what Isaiah Lewis was facing, and it was what he left when he boarded the steamship Army transport General Lyons on March 25th, 1865. Now, the Union Army transport, Lyons, was not to be confused with the USS Lyon, a Union Navy sidewheeler, and the Army transport was a screw steamer weighing 1,026 tons, and she was used primarily during the war for troop transport. The ship took part in the major campaigns against Battery Wagner, the Bermuda 100, and the assault against Fort Fisher. By the end of the war, however, or as the war's end neared, she was being used exclusively to carry troops from Wilmington, North Carolina, to Fortress Monroe, Virginia, and New York. And so it was that she put out from Wilmington on March 29, 1865, headed for Fortress Monroe. On board were large members of discharged Union soldiers headed home from the war, an undetermined number of paroled prisoners, most from the Florence and Salisbury prison stockades. These men probably head for convalescent or medical facilities in Fortress Monroe, Annapolis, and or New York. Another group was composed primarily of refugees from the war. They were able to get up the money, and they knew some people, so they got onto this Army transport. And still another was made up of an undetermined number of civilians from various walks of life. This is all I could find out about this other group. Now, on the evening of the 29th, she put into the port of Smithfield for the night, and on the morning of March 30th, she resumed her voyage north. Now, at this point, I'd like to read from an article published in the New York Times on April 3rd, 1865, especially since contemporary accounts are often more vivid in their descriptions than any reimagining I could provide, no matter how factual. Now, the article reads, Steamer General Sedgwick, which arrived at this port at noon yesterday, brought as passengers 29 persons saved from the wreck of the transport steamer General Lion, which took fire off of Cape Hatteras on the morning of Friday last and was totally destroyed. The General Lion had on board from 550 to 600 souls. The 29 who arrived here yesterday are believed all that were saved. Soon after leaving Smithfield, the wind, which was blowing from the southwest, increased in violence, and the vessel, which was a very slow one, made but little progress. At 10 o'clock on Friday morning, she was off Cape Hatteras, the wind having increased to a hurricane and the sea running very high. It was rough out there. It is believed that the vessel was about 60 miles from land when an alarm of fire was given, and a few minutes afterwards, a flame broke out at the rear of the pilot house and nearly in the center of the vessel. Several of the crew were in the rigging, and there were very few persons on deck at the time, many of the passengers being confined to their berth by seasickness. The first mate, James Gidd, he needed money, and there was pension money to be had. He just never got around to doing it until then. But anyway, it was written, respectfully returned to the Commissioner of Pensions, Isaiah Lewis, a private of Company A, 89th New Regiment, New York Volunteers, was enrolled on the 10th day of August, 1861 at Elmira for 3 years. Another one said Dix, but there's a lot of irregularities here. And is reported on rolls of company from enrollment to August 31st, 1862 to present. September and October 62, he was absent without leave, with the remark, said to have joined the cavalry, but has given no notice. And he is so born on the rolls of the company to June 30th of 1863. His name is dropped from subsequent rolls to December 31st, 1863. He's on the roll for January and February of 1864, was reported in present for the remark in arrest for desertion. And the same to April 30th, 1864, May and June, present with a remark restored to duty by order of Major General Butler. And I think this is Butler, the B's, whoever else I want to call it anymore. He forfeits all pay and allowances during the time of his desertion, and he makes good the time lost. Kid got off easy. The return for February of 64 reports him joined from desertion, February 27th, 1864, Holy Island. July and August 64 shows him present. September, October 64, missing in action at Fair Oak, Virginia. October 27th, 1864, and he is so born on company roll to April 30th, 1865. He was mustered out on an individual muster roll call on May 29th, 1865 at Elmira. This is a jumbled mess. Company and regiment were in action October 27th at Fair Oaks, Virginia. Prisoner of war record showing captured at Williamsburg Road, October 27th, 1864. He was confined at Richmond the same day and sent to Salisbury, North Carolina on November 4th, 1864. I think there's something of a final say that should go to Lewis when he submitted the following on January 17th, 1883. And it says, State of New York, County of Tioga, on the 7th day of January, AD 1883, personally appeared before me a notary public in and aforesaid county, aforesaid, Isaiah Lewis, who deposes and said he was a private in Company A, 89th Regiment of Infantry, and he has not been in the military or naval service of the United States since his discharge May 29, 1865. And further says that he did not receive any treatment for his disability in any hospital, but after his escape from the enemy, he received private treatment at Wilmington, North Carolina, and also treatment at the Soldiers' Home in the city of New York, but cannot give the exact date of said treatment. He further says that even after his escape from the enemy, that he was on his way to Fortress Monroe and was shipwrecked and was finally picked up by a vessel going to New York and taken there, and further, that he is unable to give the names of the physicians that treated him. Isaiah Lewis, sworn and subscribed before me this 17th day of January 1883. James H. Jennings, Notary Public. Now there's a lot of contradictory evidence here in his files. But this much we do know. We do know that he enlisted in the 89th New York. He was at Antietam. He probably did desert or went AWOL. It sounds more like AWOL. And eventually, he was captured and sent to Salisbury prison. He shows on the prison rolls. And he either escaped, and I'm just thinking he made it through the exchange process, as I laid it out there. He was on board the steamship Lions. There's tracks for that. And he did make it back to Annapolis, Maryland, where they sent him home. Back then, they didn't give you a pension if you were, if they could smell a lie a mile away. I've seen people turn down for pensions for a lot less. It's my gut feeling that Isaiah Lewis wasn't quite all there after Antietam. I see the correspondences that he had with various government offices. He lived all over the place. Now this fits into the classic pattern of post-traumatic stress. The guys could just never stay in one place. But no matter how you slice it, this guy went through the mill. And this is kind of a work in progress. I think there's a book here. But anyway, that's what I have. Is there any questions?
How long did he live? When did he die?
Did he die?
When did he die?
Until 1914. Nancy, yeah, he lived, and his wife continued with his pension until like 1926. That part of the records are kind of nice because it's typewritten. You know, you can read them, you know. Is there anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I thank everybody for coming, especially Bill. Hey, Dr. Bear.
Warrant nothing.
Yeah. There's a couple of books. If you want to do some more reading about the 89th, this was written by a local lady out of Owego. This is from George. He was a member of the 89th New York. And then this one here, William Robinson, was also a member of the 89th New York. Really short, very interesting books, both of them. Talks a lot about a lot of other local names in there. You might find some names you even know. So with that, if you brought any garbage in with you, there's a couple of garbage cans here. On the other hand, we survive on memberships and donations, so on your way out, please think about picking up a membership application. And Sue, where are you? Sue has some key tags with us today that were made from some of the reclaimed wood from our original building. It's engraved with our logo on one side and the where it came from on the other. Use it as a key tag, or as Sue likes to say, Christmas ornament. She's got some baseball caps and a bumper sticker. Yeah, and bumper stickers. So if you're interested on your way out, catch up with Sue, and the membership forms will be up here. If all else fails, we want your hat back.
Tag.
She's misery on inventory. And then over here, every little bit helps. Everything we've done has been with private donation, local business support. There's been no federal or state aid at this point. And all the buildings that you see down on site, I would encourage you to come down Saturdays between now and Labor Day. And we've got docents on site from 10:30 to 4:30. Come on down and we'll walk you through and give you a tour. So with that, if nobody has any further questions, and if you want to ask any question about the site or what we're doing, you're welcome to ask me. I need to hear it. I need adult members. So with that,
Thank you.
first name Jim.
If anybody's interested, we did put a mannequin together over here with the basic New York State uniform. And actually, the jacket here, kind of was taken from it, in honor of the 89th New York.
Yes, sir. Sure.
And like us, John will take